Hey, it's Tyrone Jackson, the Wealthy Investor again, and I just wanted to remind you that if you enjoy listening to the Trading Stocks Made Easy podcast, be sure to share it with your friends all across social media, including Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. If you enjoy hearing about success principles that inspire you, as well as interviews with some of my most successful students, I want to remind you it's right here at the Trading Stocks Made Easy podcast, wherever you get your podcast. And make sure you download as much free material as you want at thewealthyinvestor.net. I'll see you there.
It's time for the Trading Stocks Made Easy podcast. Each week, Trading Stocks Made Easy demystifies stock trading and investing so you can profit big. And now, here's the host of Trading Stocks Made Easy, the Wealthy Investor, Tyrone Jackson.
Hey, welcome back to Trading Stocks Made Easy. It is Tyrone Jackson, the Wealthy Investor. So happy that you are back here with me. You know, today I realized I never really told you my story and how I let go of fear around money to have the life and reality that I have around me today. So today I thought it would be interesting if I told you my story, how I deal with fear in up and down stock markets, and how fear has helped shape me as a successful human being. Well, believe it or not, I wasn't born the wealthy investor. As many of you know, I was raised by a single mother who didn't know anything about finance, and who found herself raising a child early, like in her early 20s. And my mother, like every parent, had rules in our household, even though it was just the two of us. When it came to money, we had one rule that I learned very early on, probably when I was around 12 or so, and started wanting things that cost money. My mother used to say to me, "Don't ask me for any money because we don't have any." She'd say, "Now repeat that. Don't ask you for any money because we don't have any." Right. Say that one more time. "Don't ask me for any money because we don't have any." Okay. She was like, "You got that?" "Yes, I have that." So even though we lived in federally subsidized housing, once you got inside our apartment, everything looked really, really nice. My mother was really big on keeping everything clean, so we always lived very nicely, and she was a great cook. And her specialty, of course, was soul food. So my favorite day was Sunday because that's when she had time from working, and I knew that she could spend 2-3 hours in the kitchen making soul food, and it was great. And I remember people coming over because every once in a while we crammed 25, 30 people into this apartment, and we'd have like some sort of celebration, you know, for the 4th of July. We had a terrace and a balcony. We lived near the water. And people would come over and socialize, and people would say to me all the time, "Man, your mother is such a great cook. How are you so skinny?" Which I didn't know how to answer at the time. You know, when you're a young kid or you're a teenager, I was just like, I don't know. They're like, this food is just so good. But behind that were money beliefs. And her money beliefs were like, we don't have any money. Life is hard. And as I've shared on the show many times, she used to say to me, the best thing you could do for yourself financially, because you're getting older now, is get a job that pays overtime. That was like her really big thing. But she used to say, remember, the more you make, the more they take. And she was referring to the IRS. So being a teenager who didn't know anything about money, a blank slate, I was like, overtime. Now, I believe that we all come to this earth with a different purpose. We all manifest in this earth for different reasons. And usually they have to do with love and fear in the end. They can be very particular, but usually your soul's purpose is dealing with love and fear, right? I was kind of blessed early on with not having a lot of fear, but I have one intense fear that follows me to this day. And that intense fear is fear of failure. I don't know why I have this fear of failure. Success is not a problem for me, but if I blew through this lifetime and I didn't do anything to have an impact on the world, I would feel terrible. For some reason, I have this drive to be successful and to help other people. So I have been the type of person my whole life who's afraid of not taking advantage of opportunities. Now, I can look back at my childhood and point that to several reasons. I don't know if this is really true, but at least I'll share it with you. When I grew up, people around me were encouraged to be very working class. Like you would drive a cab or work for the post office or maybe become a police officer or a fireman, or you would have a job assisting someone. That was mostly for the women. Like if you were pretty, you could become like an assistant somewhere. So when I'm starting to look at how I'm going to go out into the world, I'm like, I don't want to be an assistant. I don't want to drive a cab. I don't want to be a firefighter. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but like those people don't make a lot of money. And I remember having someone in my life who really talked a lot about money and wealth and what was possible and how they were helping companies grow. And I thought, I want to be like that, right? If there's enough money out there in the world, why would I want to work for the post office? So I always felt like if I didn't live out some big dream, I was failing. And today, this is so funny as an adult to kind of reconcile everything. Today, I know that as trading time for dollars. Now, you hear me talk a lot about trading time for dollars, and that's what most people do. And I don't have anything bad to say about people who get a paycheck. My view as the wealthy investor is it is a great place to start, but you don't want to stay there. Why? Because you're not going to get rich trading time for dollars. There are a few people who do it. The movie stars of the world, few people who work in banking and in the insurance company, right? And they're working for a business that they don't own, but they are handsomely paid. And they ultimately learn that they should be investing their money and growing their wealth. So that's where my belief comes from about working for time for dollars. I saw so many people doing it in my neighborhood where I grew up, and they were struggling to pay the bills. And this is interesting because the neighborhood where I grew up outside of New York City, everybody was trading time for dollars. Everybody was talking about having bills that they couldn't pay. Everybody was talking about the taxes and the tax man. And I thought, why would you live by that? Why would you live like that? Because one of the things that I would see on television, when I grew up, there was a television show called Dynasty. And those people were living glamorous lifestyles. And they never really seemed to be about money. And they had endless clothes and smiles and trips. And I thought, well, I kind of want to be like them. There was another show on television when I was growing up called Sanford and Son, starring the great Red Fox. And although I thought that was an entertaining story, I knew I did not want to be a junk man, right? So somewhere between Dynasty and Sanford and Son would be my life, was what I was actually hoping. So as I began to grow older, most of you know I spent a large portion of my career on television, actually, as an actor, and I had done several movies, and my mainstay at that time was really commercials. And I loved appearing in television commercials because I got residual income. Now, here's kind of like my concept of life, and I always call it the dialing down of fear. I learned at age 12, and I don't know how to do something that I call today visualization. Many people call it visualization. So my mother had a belief, since we get most of our beliefs from our parents, my mother had a belief that if you were sitting around doing nothing, you were not productive. I had a belief that at age 12, somehow that money could just come to you. I didn't know that much about it, but I didn't believe in this notion that you had to keep busy to make money. So I used to lay around on a Saturday afternoon on the couch, staring up at the ceiling, dreaming about what my life would be. Now, my mother's cleaning up the apartment, and she sees me laying on the couch, and she's got the broom and the vacuum cleaner, and she's wiping things down with Windex, and she's talking on the phone at the same time, and here I am sitting on the couch looking up at the ceiling. That was work to me, because I was training my mind to think about the future and see the things that I want. As I grew older, I learned that that is actually a skill. Visualization is actually a skill, and it's how I created the life that I had. And I saw myself flying around. I saw myself being famous. I saw myself having no problem with money at all. And I can still remember at 16 saying, I will be a millionaire at 21. And then I moved it to 22 because I felt like you should have a year or two of struggle in your adult life. And I remember visualizing, because when I grew older in my teens, I would actually look out the window because I felt like I was telling the universe. And I said, well, you know what? I don't want to be a millionaire too fast. Why don't we move it from 21, 22? I should kind of feel what it's like to struggle. And then I'll make my first million. Had no idea how it was going to come, but that's what I believed. So fear for me was the reverse of what I see in a lot of my students, which is that, oh my God, I'm going to lose money. I was like, listen, if I don't take a risk in here somewhere, I'm going to wind up a guy working for the post office and just drinking alcohol all weekend. And I would be miserable, and people would say, there's that good-looking guy who I really like. If he would just stop drinking on the weekend, that Tyrone guy would be a really nice person. And I didn't want that life. And to be really honest with you, I felt like that was my destiny. And even today, I still feel a little bit like I cheated my destiny. Well, since we didn't have a lot of money, guess what? I learned to get a job really early on. And I would take my allowance and I would go to a bookstore. And that bookstore was called Barnes & Noble. And if you travel from the outer boroughs of New York City into Manhattan, there was a Barnes & Noble everywhere. And you could actually go in there and read the books for free and spend the entire day. And I remember the first book I ever got on wealth was mutual funds. How to make money in mutual funds. I was like, okay, I don't know. So I took my allowance. I bought this book on mutual funds. I left a little bit of money on the side. I also had a part-time job. So I got this book on mutual funds, and this is what I said to myself. Even if I don't understand all the language in here, at least I'd be learning something about money. So I was always money driven. And then when I got into commercials and I was making residual income and I didn't have to work physically for those checks to come, I thought I hit the mother lode. It was like the greatest thing in the world because, you see, my beliefs had been confirmed. That I would go in, get all glamorous, hair, makeup, and all of that, sometimes work with a celebrity. I'd watch myself on television, and these checks would come in the mailbox. And I remember when I was still living at home and on television and doing commercials, I had a stack of checks. And I said, I'll take those checks in on Friday. Now, why do I share this story with you? Because this is all true. And I just want to point out how we all create our lives based on our belief systems. See, no one had ever talked to me about belief systems. I knew I was afraid of working for the post office for the rest of my life. But yet, at 17, 18, 19, I was already on television and I was getting residual income based on my beliefs. Now, what happened next was amazing. Why? Because I went from dreaming about residual income to creating wealth. That part of my story and overcoming fear right after this.
Want to increase your stock market trading profits? Then you need to start your monthly membership to WITradeschool.com right now. Don't understand how to write covered calls for monthly income? No problem. Simply review Tyrone's latest stock trades in our video library as many times as you need. WITradeschool.com is all about helping you get the financial education you need to earn money in the stock market and change your financial life. Tyrone Jackson, the wealthy investor, has helped his students earn thousands of dollars per month trading stocks online from home. These are people just like you. So what are you waiting for? Follow Tyrone Jackson's red-hot stock trades and investment strategies today. Don't wait. Start your monthly membership at WITradeschool.com right now.
Hey, it's Tyrone Jackson, Wealthy Investor again, and I just wanted to remind you that if you enjoy listening to the Trading Stocks Made Easy podcast, be sure to share it with your friends all across social media, including Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. If you enjoy hearing about success principles that inspire you, as well as interviews with some of my most successful students, I want to remind you it's right here at the Trading Stocks Made Easy podcast, wherever you get your podcast. And make sure you download as much free material as you want at thewealthyinvestor.net. I'll see you there. So today I figured I'd share my story with you and how I overcame fear, and I'm still in the process of overcoming fear, just at a much higher level. So I learned the difference between residual income and wealth in my 20s. And in my 20s, I already had residual income coming in from being on television. And as I've shared with you many times, I made a lot of money in the voiceover business. And one of the gigs, you've probably heard me on radio and television many years ago, I used to do legal reads because I was a very good, what we called copy reader. And a legal read is that stuff that comes at the end of the commercial no one listens to. And I used to do that for the McDonald's Corporation. And it went a little something like this. Void where prohibited by law. Prices may vary at participating McDonald's. And they would attach that legal read to multiple commercials, and I'd get paid for every legal read and get residuals for that. And that was my bread and butter for quite some time. Well, after I had done a couple of movies, my life started to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and I noticed a very, very interesting pattern that I was making money. I was earning money doing what I love, being a performer, a voiceover artist. But what was amazing was I was not getting rich. So back then, I would make $50,000, $65,000. If the year went really well, I'd make $100,000. The advantage was I wasn't working every day because I was living off my residuals that were coming in from the commercials. So $100,000 20 years ago in New York City was good, but I had bigger dreams. And I realized by reading, because whenever I got stuck, I would turn to a book. I guess if I were growing up today, I'd go online and go to YouTube. But back then, there was no online, there was no YouTube. So I would just go to a book and find out what it is I needed to find out. Well, one of my favorite magazines, in addition to books, I also love magazines, was the Forbes, I think they call it the Forbes 500 Richest People in the World. And I would get that issue and I would read that issue probably 7 times because I decided to go to college. We had no money for college. Same thing. We have no money, right? But I figured out how to be able to pay for it using grants. And then one of the things that happens for some of us when you have desire and no money is you become very resourceful. You begin to see things a little bit different. You begin to figure out solutions when there's a problem. And I became very resourceful. And I figured out how to pay for college. And my mother's like, you're going to college? I'm like, yeah, it's a city university. She was like, well, how much do I have to pay? I was like, you don't have to pay anything. She was like, well, go on to college, right? Because it didn't cost anything. So I would go to the city university while doing commercials and wait for that Forbes 500 list to come out every single year. And I remember, because in college I was a psychology major, I remember thinking I'm making good money, or as a lawyer friend of mine said, you never make money, you earn money. I was earning good money for my 20s, but I wasn't getting rich. And if I just could read this magazine, maybe I could see some patterns in the rich people's behavior that would kind of unlock the door for me. And I noticed, and I'll never forget this day, when I noticed that everybody who was on the Forbes 500 list was working for or owned a publicly traded company. And I was like, well, all these people who are billionaires, because millionaire had become so unfashionable, all these people who are billionaires, they seem to have some connection to the stock market. And I couldn't figure that out at the time. And I remember about 10 years ago, I just laughed. I was like, because they owned assets that were going up in value that had nothing to do with time for dollars, right? You work for a company, they issue you stock. You're going to get wealthy if the company does well because the stock price goes up. But back then, I just didn't know about that. So I was like, I have to do something in the stock market. But I had also seen in late night books and tapes, real estate, some guys on television going, you're going to get rich through real estate. I had a credit card and I was like, I'm going to order those books and tapes. And because my motivation was so high, why was it so high? I just didn't ever want to have to work for the post office. So I was afraid of failing. So I got those books and tapes, and lo and behold, 13 weeks after I got the books and tapes, I had my first property, no money down. And I bought it with a buddy of mine who was also equally motivated and had a single mom. So we were like, real estate is going to be our way out. Instead of buying a house, we bought a condominium in a very fashionable part of New York City called Tribeca. It was just on the come up, and Robert De Niro had opened a studio there, and Tribeca. But it was still affordable. We pooled our money together and we bought this condominium. And then we put ads in the New York Times, because that's what they said to do in the books and tapes. And we got tenants. We found out how to run credit. And we took in this one tenant, Barbara, who in the end turned out to be mentally ill and who got locked up in an institution. I'll tell you that story sometime. And we were trying to collect next month's rent from this woman who was locked up in an institution. And by the way, that wasn't in the books and tapes, how to get your rent money from an institution where the person is crazy. But she had a great credit score. So the funny part was none of that dampened my ideas on wealth. Even when I had to pay the mortgage on this property out of my own pocket, I felt like I could still do it. Why? I just didn't want to fail. I just didn't want to work at the post office. I just didn't want to have a miserable life. I just didn't want to complain about bills. That was my motivation. And I felt like if I could just apply myself and get up to the plate, I'll have some misses, but I'll have some wins, and it's got to be better than just trading time for dollars and doing what everybody else is doing around me. So my partner and I could not maintain our partnership, and my partner at the time said, I can't do this real estate stuff. I'll sell you my half of the condo for $1, because he had read it in a book that you could sell your interest in something for $1. Guess what? That meant that mortgage payment was all on me. And I thought, I could do it. Well, long story short, I wound up having to get rid of that property at a loss, cost me more money, and I felt terrible. Rarely do I feel like a failure. I've always felt in my life that everything that didn't work out was a lesson. And if I could learn a lesson, I could move on. But I felt like a failure. I simply bit off more than I could chew. And I bit off more than I could chew because I didn't have any experience in this real estate. No one in my family knew how to invest money. And look at me. Look at where this got me. But once I got past the emotion of having to give up the property at a loss, I realized that no one had ever taught me and my family about wealth. I had no model. And if I had a rich uncle, maybe he could have come in when we were in trouble and couldn't make the mortgage payments. And maybe he would go, here's what you can do. Here's 7 choices. But I didn't have a rich uncle. My favorite uncle drove a New York City bus. He wasn't going to help me with my real estate investments. So I realized that numbers matter. And if I were ever going to go into real estate again, maybe I should start with something smaller. Maybe not a $250,000 property. Maybe a $60,000 or $70,000 property. Because if my tenants didn't pay, well, I knew I could make that mortgage payment. So I knew if I tried real estate again, because my credit was shot for 7 years for the loss on the property and some other bad things that came out of that, I figured I'd take 7 years and I'd start again. And guess what happened? That's what I did. I learned about credit repair. I learned about credit scores. I learned about credit reporting agencies. You see, I figured if I would take every negative that came my way and flipped it into a positive, I'd be better for it. It didn't even take 7 years, gang. They don't tell you that out there when you have something bad happen on your credit report. But it doesn't take 7 years. You know why? There's so much money in helping you repair your credit and get back on track. And that's what I discovered. Now, a couple of years after the real estate, I told my father, who didn't live with his dad, I don't really like this real estate stuff because you got to chase the tenants. And he said, hey, you're probably a stock market guy. Now, I'm going to tell you the truth. I don't know how my father knew anything else about the stock market at all. You see, my father was getting older and he lived in senior citizen housing at a poverty level. And I would go see him 2 Sundays out of the month because he had been such a great influence in my life. Even though he didn't live with us, I loved him very, very much. And he was so kind and so smart. And on one of my visits, he said to me, you're a stock market guy. I have a hunch you don't like this real estate stuff. You're a stock market guy. And I said, okay. He goes, you know what I'm going to do for you? I'm going to get you some books and tapes again. Today we just download stuff. And I want you to learn how to trade and invest in the stock market. Well, I was still on TV. I was still making money in commercials. And I figured, okay. And I always tell this story that when my father said, I want you to learn how to trade in the stock market, I gave him that Scooby-Doo look. Well, okay, Shaggy. Because I had no idea what the stock market was like, but I did make the connection, something to do with Forbes magazine and the stock market and being a millionaire. So I decided to go with it. A couple of weeks later, I go see my father in senior citizens housing, and we're right at the end of the visit, and he goes, hey, look on that table over here. You see that box? I said, yeah. He goes, that's for you. And he literally said, as only a father could say, take that home, go through that box, and tell me what you learned. And I remember thinking, man, these people have just ripped my father off. I don't know how much he paid. That's a big box over there. But I'll give it a shot. And rarely do I say on a podcast. So you know I'm telling you the truth. And I get these VHS tapes. Remember VHS? And there's like 35 of these how to be a successful stock market trader videos. And for those of you who don't know, I happen to be lactose intolerant, so I can't have any dairy, cheese, butter. I just feel terrible. But this night, for some reason, I had to have a bowl of cornflakes. And I got back to my apartment in Manhattan, this big, beautiful apartment I had in New York City. And I started on tape 1. And in the middle of tape 1, they show you how to use volatility trading and covered call writing to become a stock market millionaire in 5 years or less. And let me tell you, I was eating those cornflakes, and when they put that $1 million instructional guide on the screen, and this is how you do it, I was floored. I was like, wait a minute, what? And I rewound the tape. I watched that section 7 times, and they go, yeah. And just doing all this is how you become a stock market millionaire. And I just didn't sleep for a week. You see, because I was one of those people, I was never mad at money. I was never mad at people who had money. I was never angry about those rich people do something, but I was afraid of failing. So anything that would keep me out of that post office, it had $1 million on it, and it was legal, I was going to give a shot. So it was then when I knew I was going to be rich in the stock market, because it was like everything came together. I had residual income. I had been dreaming and visualizing it for a long time. And I had that Forbes magazine with all those people who had wealth tied to the stock market. So when I learned how to buy a stock and quickly sell it, and buy it back and quickly sell it, and build a position in long-term dividend-paying stocks, I had every single tool that I needed. I just needed some money to put in a brokerage account. And my first brokerage account, I had read out of a magazine, hey, if you want to start stock market trading, use one of these discount brokers. I didn't even know what a discount broker was, but I knew you needed a broker. And they had discount brokerage houses where you could start with $500. Now, because I had done work on myself and I learned that visualization was a real tool, I knew that opening a brokerage account for $500 was not the action that was going to make me rich in and of itself. It was the action that was going to lead to something. You see, sometimes I just needed to take that first step. It was really small. But if I had that account open, guess what? The next time I had another $500, I could put that in. And then another $500, I could put that in. And I just needed what I call today momentum, some positive momentum. Now, was I afraid of losing my money in the stock market? I'm going to be honest with you. I was not. Why? I knew I could go get another $500 from somewhere. Throughout my life, I was going to have another $500 at some point. You know, I'm just lucky that way. So That $500 trade turned into $600, which turned into $7,500, which turned into $12,000, $20,000, and I kept going. I just needed the momentum to get started. I quickly understood in the stock market an old term you may have heard: you win some, you lose some. I couldn't be afraid of losing money as long as I won more than I lost. In other words, as long as I kept placing winning trades and fewer or less losing trades, my money was going to multiply. And guess what I did? I started telling my friends how great the stock market was. Now, in my life, this is really interesting because I had half my friends had like wealth consciousness and other half had a poor man's consciousness. So when I would go to the poor people and I would go, I'm making money in the stock market, they go, oh, you're about to lose it all. And when I would go to my friends who had the greater consciousness, they were like, well, we already make money in the stock market. And let me tell you something. I was so pissed that these creative people did not tell me they were already making money in the stock market. And I go, why didn't you tell me? And as a group, they said almost the same thing. You never asked us. I didn't even know to ask you if you were in the stock market. Why? Because I came from so little. But I started to learn then, when I used to speak to these two groups about trading and buying stocks online, that people had different money beliefs and expectations. I knew which group I wanted to be with more often, and that's the group I chose. And that's when I learned about the power of consciousness and beliefs about money. Was I afraid of losing money in the stock market? No. Why? Because I needed money to live. At some point, I was going to be able to refund that account if I just had the habit. Was I afraid of losing money trading? No, because this is a game of you win some, you lose some. Although it's not gambling, some stocks will always reverse on you. Well, if I could reduce the amount of stocks that reverse on me and the stocks that went forward, I knew I could be that millionaire. See, one of the things that's so fascinating about stock market trading and investing is not only is there a learning process, you learn how to choose better. It's like in my dating life. When I was dating early on, I would choose beautiful young women who didn't like me. But as time went on, I realized that I should choose women who actually liked me and who don't reject me. In other words, I learned how to choose better. Well, if life and success is nothing but a series of positive habits, why don't I learn from my choices and my results? Now, I'm a guy, so that sounds really logical, right? But in fact, that's what it is. And under those thoughts are feelings. Feelings of I don't deserve. Feelings of I'm less than. Feeling of how could this be happening to me? How could I have discovered the stock market and I'm making all this money and half of my friendship circle is still struggling? It was because of how I felt about myself deep down inside. And when I learned to feel that I deserved, that I'm no better than anybody else in this life, but I don't deserve to suffer. When I learned that I didn't have to suffer in this life, I was freer and freer to make more money, to have more success. For some reason, I also feel that part of my destiny was helping other people. So if you're in my friendship circle and something good happens to me, I'm going to be the first one to show you exactly how it's done. So you can make the choice and do it for you. I'm happy to be alive. The worst parts of my life are over. I don't have to live by other people's belief systems because I can go out into the world and develop my own. And that's what I love about being the wealthy investor. Now, I don't want to bore you with too many stories. I'm going to share more stories about my life and what I've learned in the upcoming episodes. But this just gives you some insight into how fear has worked for me and how I've moved beyond it to create a life that is bigger and better than even I imagined. But I will tell you really quickly in the time that we have left How did I become the wealthy investor? Remember my old real estate buddy? Well, we didn't speak for a couple of years, nothing to do with the real estate transaction. We were just learning, evolving, and life was moving forward. Well, one day out of the blue, he calls me and he says, "Hey, you have been on my mind." And I said, "Well, how are you?" And he was now married and he had a bigger and better life and he had a soulmate as a partner. And he was telling me all about his journey. He goes, "But that's not really the reason that I called you. I called you because I'm now in the seminar business." And I said, "Well, what is your seminar about?" He goes, "Well, my wife and I are soulmates and we're teaching other couples how to find their soulmate. And we use visualization as a tool and we have this whole system." I was like, "That's great." And he goes, "And that business is branched out into us helping people live their dreams." And he goes, "I still see you on TV, so I know you're living your dreams. Have you ever thought about going in the seminar business?" And I said, "Nah, I'm not going to go in the seminar business. I'm happy where I am. I had built my first home and I had a house on 10 acres of land and I was really, really happy. And I was married at the time with 2 kids." He goes, "I just keep thinking about you and I feel like you belong in the seminar business. Would you be willing to come on as a guest on one of my How to Shape Your Life teleconference calls," we call them at the time? I was like, "Yeah, I'll go on as a guest. I'll be happy to share whatever it is I know." He goes, "Well," because we had just started getting caught up. He goes, "Well, you're trading stocks now. You built this house. I had also bought another piece of real estate that I could afford and I rented out." He goes, "You're living your dreams and plus you're on TV." I was like, "Okay, I'll do the call. So he calls me back and he goes, "Great call. Will you think about the seminar business?" And I said, yeah, I'll think about the seminar business. And within 24 hours, I had written a whole seminar about how to create wealth. I'd never done it before, but I thought to myself, how do I explain this to people? So can you imagine talking to large groups of people about wealth building and you've never spoken to large groups of people before? Was I afraid? I was. But I thought, if I don't do this seminar business and talk to these people, at least I could be back at the post office. You see, that was my big motivation, even though I was already successful. I never wanted to go back at the post office. Now, if you work at the post office, don't be upset with me. I'm just saying that was my marker for everything that I did. I'm just still so afraid of failure, and that drives my success. And I spoke to 30 people in the room about a wealth building plan and consciousness and all of my beliefs, and they loved it. And that's where the Wealthy Investor Program was born. I had no idea I'd wind up being a sensation on YouTube and talk shows and leading people all over the world. But I think what I am most pleased when I look back at my journey is that I didn't get involved with fear for too long. I felt it, but I just didn't succumb to it, because if you don't live your dreams, somebody else is going to do it. They're going to live the life that you want. They're going to create the financial life that you didn't. Don't be left out of the game. So I'll leave you with this from a guy who grew up in federally subsidized housing, who is now a self-made millionaire. It's really, really worth it. And the thing that you need going forward is that financial education and that wealth consciousness that will open up the new door for you, your family, forever. Thanks so much for listening to my story and how I let go of fear. I hope some part of my story has had some sort of positive or inspirational resonance with you, because I do this show for you so that you and I can have bigger financial lives and change the world for the positive. Tyrone Jackson, the Wealthy Investor, saying I'll see you right here on the next Trading Stocks Made Easy.
You've been listening to the Trading Stocks Made Easy podcast. Be sure to rate and review our show on iTunes. While you're on iTunes, be sure to click the subscribe button and you'll automatically receive our next episode.